And hello, and welcome to the overview discussion for the Principles of Marketing course, Marketing 301. I'm recording this well in advance of the beginning of the class and um, prior to an important event taking place in the United Kingdom on June 23rd. I have to um, be in China between June 15th and June 28th, and I wanted to get a couple of videos in the can, and I'll um, get back to the importance of June 23rd. So, in this discussion, I'm going to focus on two things, and I have a handy dandy little cheat sheet here that I have some notes on. So if you see me glancing down periodically, or worse yet, even putting my glasses on to read things, you'll know why. The two things we'll talk about: a definition of marketing and kind of look at it in a little more detail. And the second is that we will talk about marketing macro environment, which refers to factors that influence an organization's behavior, but over which an organization has no control. And you say, well, I got no clue what you just said. So, for example, and we'll talk much more detail about this, or more detail, not necessarily much more detail, later on, you look at economic considerations, and an individual organization can't really influence a country's or even the world's economy, but the um, the world's economy, um, or an individual country's economy can play a major role in what a firm does or doesn't do from a marketing perspective. So let's start with a definition of marketing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the definition of marketing that's in your textbook, and then talk about Exhibit 1.1, which is very nearby the definition. So the American Marketing Association states that marketing is the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, capturing, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. So again, marketing is the activity, set of institutions, and processes for creating, capturing, communicating, delivering, and exchanging offerings that have value for customers, clients, partners, and society at large. And there's a lot going on in that definition. And that definition is much different, and you're going to hear me refer periodically. And when I do this in class, students are like, "Oh my God, he's going back to when he took his Principles of Marketing course." When I took my Principles of Marketing course back in the spring of 1977, that definition that appears in the book is much different than the definition that I learned back in the spring of 1977. You'll notice that, for example, the definition says nothing about a product. Okay, there's nothing about a product in there. It talks about offerings, but it doesn't talk about a product. So, and that's important because what it suggests is that marketing evolves. Okay, it continues to evolve, and so we'll look at some of the components of marketing based on what's in Exhibit 1.1. So Exhibit 1.1 talks about marketing creating value. And value doesn't mean inexpensive. Value refers to a situation where the benefits of a particular activity exceed the cost of that particular activity. So again, it's not the fact that something's cheap, right? It's the fact that people perceive that the benefits they're getting from something are greater than the cost associated with that particular something. So the example that I like to use, and I had to hesitate I had to be careful about using it in the spring semester. I think I can go back and use it again now, is that the example I like to use with respect to value is Chipotle. You go back 25 years, Chipotle didn't exist. And Chipotle is, except for a little bit of a glitch there in late 2015 and through the early part of 2016 because of some food control issues. Chipotle to me is an excellent example of value because uh, I have stood in line there for 20 or 30 minutes to get I get a burrito bowl when I go there, and the question is why? Why would and when I've done management seminars, I've had people, maybe your parents' age, maybe my age, sit there and say, why would you do that? And to me, it's because of the value that Chipotle provides. Value in the sense that, when I go there, I can see my burrito being made. I can ask them for more rice. I can ask them for more fajita stuff. I can ask them for more corn. I can ask them for more salsa. I can ask them for more chicken, but they'll charge me more for more chicken. In case you didn't know that, you can, the meat. You ask for extra stuff, they'll up the price on you, but not so much some of the ingredients. So, the fact that first of all, when I'm paying X amount of dollars, and Chipotle is not inexpensive relative to, let's say, McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell or places like that. But the idea that I can see what's being made, I get input into what's being made, and for me, the benefits of Chipotle outweigh the cost of getting my burrito bowl. So marketing creates value. Uh, Exhibit 1.1 also talks about satisfying needs and wants, and a lot of stuff going on with needs and wants. Needs and wants change through time. They tend to increase through time. And really good example. I mean, there's a lot of good examples. I like to use Coca-Cola as an example of changing needs and wants. So when I was when I was a young kid, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, if you wanted a Coke, that's exactly what you got. You got a Coca-Cola, right? There was nothing else. And not only did you get a Coca-Cola, but you only got Coca-Cola in one size. It was a 12-ounce glass bottle. That was it. There were no cans. There was no plastic, right? There was no Diet Coke. There was no Cherry Coke. There was no Sprite. None of that. There was Coca-Cola in one size, one type of container. Now you look at Coca-Cola's product line, and if you just look at the soft drinks, you've got Coke, you've got Diet Coke, you've got caffeine-free Coke, you've got caffeine-free Diet Coke, you've got Diet Cherry Coke. My wife's a Diet Cherry Coke fan. I mean, you go through this whole laundry list: Diet Coke with Diet Coke with a lemon, Diet Coke with a lime. I mean, just incredible. It's because needs and wants change, and so marketers are trying to satisfy needs and wants. Uh, Exhibit 1.1 indicates that marketing entails an exchange, and this class provides a nice example of that. Uh, you know, you're paying $700 a credit hour, let's say, um, in the hopes of getting 3 credits, and the exchange comes in the sense that you're paying the money, and I'm allegedly providing you guidance and information so that you can successfully complete the Marketing 301 course. So, my contribution is knowledge, quote unquote. Your contribution is money, right? So there's an exchange going on there, right? My knowledge for your money. It's a wonderful concept. Exhibit 1.1 also talks about product place, where it says that the marketing requires product place, price, and promotion decisions, the so-called 4Ps of marketing, or the 4Ps of the marketing mix, right? 4Ps of the marketing mix. And if you look at the syllabus, you'll see that much of the course, probably 2/3 of the course, revolves around product place, price, and promotion type decisions. And what marketers are trying to do is they're trying to come up with the correct blend or blends of product place, price, and promotion so that they can meet and satisfy customer needs and wants. And then Exhibit 1.1 also talks about that marketing can be performed by individuals and organizations. For a long time we thought about businesses. Businesses market themselves, and then one of the revolutionary things back in the late 1960s into the early 1970s was that organizations, right? Not just businesses, but organizations could market themselves. And then, maybe 30 years ago, they started talking about individual marketing. And you say, well, I don't know that I know what you're talking about. This year in the United States, what's coming up in November? Elections, right? Presidential candidates, Senate candidates, some states governors, and things like that. Those people are marketing themselves, right? Think about do you have a brand? What is your personal brand? So we've talked about the definition of marketing, and we've talked a little bit about Exhibit 1.1. Next thing we're going to talk about is the marketing macro environment. And your book uses an acronym. I'm not crazy about the acronym. The book uses in chapter 5. It talks about CDSTEP, CDSTEP, as an acronym to kind of summarize what the marketing macro environment is all about. I prefer to use the acronym PEST, PEST. With P standing for political, E standing for economic, S standing for sociocultural, and T standing for technology. And what we'll do is we'll briefly talk about each one of the letters in the PEST acronym. So we'll start with P, since PEST starts with P, just like Paul starts with P. Right? And by the end of this course, you may be thinking that Paul is a real pest, but that's another story for another time. So P stands for political, and I like to, when I talk about this particular component, I talk about both politics and regulatory stuff. Very technical business term, right? Stuff. And oftentimes there's a link between politics and regulation, and the United States provides a nice example of that. And this is not about my political affiliation or your political affiliation or anything like that. But as a general rule, Republicans in the United States tend to be more pro-business, and the Democratic Party tends to be more pro-labor. And that gets played out from a regulatory perspective because the Republicans tend to favor less regulation in the marketplace, and Democrats tend to favor more regulation in the marketplace. And one of my mantras, one of my sayings, and if you take me for more than one course, you'll hear this across courses, is that regulation costs money. So something that's regulated is going to cost money because you might have to have a state agency, a government agency, whatever. The people that work for those agencies, they like to get paid, they like to eat food, right, and things like that. And anything that costs money from a marketing perspective, anything that costs money from a marketing perspective could increase the price of a product, because your prices, some of you are accountancy majors, right? When you're pricing your product, one of the things you got to consider is cost. And so if you've got regulatory costs, that will add to the cost of the product. And so the political situation can oftentimes influence the regulatory situation, and that brings up the June 23rd event that I was talking about. So you may have heard of this thing called Brexit, Brexit. And what it refers to is basically the United Kingdom voted on, or is voting on, from my perspective, voted on June 23rd whether or not to remain in the European Union. So very much political issue, also an economic issue to some extent, but political and regulatory, because Britain, the United Kingdom, is part of the European Union. There's a lot of rules and regulations that it has to follow. And if the country decides that it doesn't want to be part of the European Union anymore, then there's going to be a whole lot of regulatory, political, and eventually economic things that flow from the United Kingdom deciding either to stay or not stay in the European Union. So we spent a little bit of time talking about political. E, again, stands for economic, and we could go a lot of different directions with economic considerations and how they affect organizations. One of the things you might want to think about is what you learned in Principles of Economics. You learned about gross domestic products. So the gross domestic product, the value of goods and services produced in an economy in a particular period of time. And marketers are looking for countries where gross domestic product is increasing, What is the gross domestic product per capita, right? You think about that from a perspective of, as gross domestic product per capita increases, that means people are able to perhaps afford more and different things. So, you got the whole thing with the gross domestic product as well as gross domestic product per capita. One of the things to think about is in 2007 through 2009, there was the Great Recession that not only hit the United States but was felt throughout the world, and kind of the things that occurred because of that. A lot of people were placing a lot more emphasis. They might have been trading down. So instead of, for example, buying a brand name product, so if you went to a grocery store, you need to eat, but instead of maybe getting Green Giant green beans, you might have bought a store brand. You're still eating green beans, but it's not the Green Giant label. S stands for sociocultural, and there's a lot of different aspects of sociocultural considerations that impact organizations. But again, as the whole thing with the marketing macro environment points out, is organizations are influenced by these things, but organizations themselves don't really influence these particular macro environmental factors. So, one sociocultural aspect is the concept of demographics, which is basically, the descriptors of a particular population. So, for example, it becomes important for marketers to have an understanding of, what's a population's age. And so one of the things marketers might look at is the percent of the population that's between 0 and 15 and 16 and, let's say, 49 and 50 to 64 and above. And they're looking at that. Marketers are looking at that because, people in different phases of their life, they're going to have different needs and wants, right? So when you're your age, you're thinking of certain things, you're going to dress a certain way, you're going to eat a certain way. 10 years from now, many of you may be married, you may have children, you may be buying houses, right? So your needs and wants are going to be, very different. So the demographic profile, right? Another aspect of demographics is kind of the makeup of the population. And in the United States, increasingly, there's an increasing Hispanic population. That has important implications for marketing. All right. So we've talked about P, E, and S, and the last one to talk about, and we won't spend a great deal of time on it, is technology, in part because technology provides a really nice segue into the marketing in the 2010s discussion, which follows the overview. And you might not be able to appreciate, or maybe you can, but the tremendous changes in technology that have occurred. And I go back and when I do this in the classroom situation, I ask the students about, what was the price of the first cell phone, or when was the cell phone introduced? And just to give you an example of how things have changed, cell phone was introduced in 1984, and the price of that device in 1984 was $3,995. That was just for the cell phone. Okay, that didn't include the plan. And what you gotta recognize is, back when cell phones first started, there weren't a lot of coverage areas. So you were paying incredible amounts of money for this device, right? And then you had to get a plan with it. And then on top of it, it didn't work in a lot of places because there weren't the cell towers that currently exist. Now, by contrast, right? I just saw something today where you buy some sort of an Android device, and you get the second one. I think it was a Samsung. You buy one, you get one free. So we're giving away those things now as marketers. We're basically giving away the cell phones, and part of the reason is we're forcing people to sign up for 2-year service contracts. So and you think of all the things that are now done via cell phone. That couldn't be done, that weren't done because of the technology that didn't exist when the cell phone or the smartphone did not exist. So the clock on the wall tells me that I hit 19 and a half minutes. So in trying to keep it under 20, we'll stop there and we'll see you down the road. Bye.